Hey everyone, I'm very excited for today. I'm going to hit record here. And we have a very special guest today that's coming on, and he is one of the instructors for the Healer's Ways. His name is Ryan Sprague, and he'll be joining us in about 10 minutes, and I'm very excited about that. We have an incredible lineup of instructors for the Healer's Ways. And I want to talk a little bit about, before Ryan joins us, I want to talk a little bit about the program overall, because he's going to be talking about his particular module that he's teaching. But I want to give you a general overview of what the Healer's Ways is and what it's going to be all about. And so, one of the background of why I even created this program and collaborated with so many wonderful teachers and healers is that through the process of my work, I had found that there were many things I was really interested in. And so, like I became a Reiki master, I studied sound healing, I spent thousands of dollars being trained in shamanic healing and in coaching and all different aspects of healing arts. And what I found was there were some things I really wanted to dive deeper into, and there were some things I was comfortable just having a broad sense of what it meant. And I really enjoy and appreciate being able to refer clients to those people that are experts in those areas. Things like herbology, things like astrology. I knew that I had a really big interest in some of these aspects, but I didn't necessarily want to focus on that in my own training. However, for people that really are looking to either deepen their healing practice or just start a new career, and you're not really sure where to go or what to do, this is such an incredible opportunity to work with people that are already masters in their field, that are already doing the work, that will give you an opportunity to see what do you appreciate, what really calls to you. It'll give you this wonderful broad overview. And also, it will give you an opportunity to dive deeper into the things that really are meaningful to you. And so you won't have to create something that or spend a lot of time and energy and resources on things that, maybe at the end of the day aren't really something you want to do full time with your work. And so there are some things that are going to be really relevant in this work. And I want to talk about one of the things that's really important to us in the work we do. And we have a team of people that work with various modalities. We run retreats, we run courses, we do coaching. And so one of the things that was really apparent to me when I went full time into this work was that I wanted to make sure that I was engaging in activities that were aligned with my values, that felt authentic to me and the ancestry that I represent, and also getting the permission of people that carried other traditions to work with their modality and the way they were teaching. And I also wanted to make sure that I was coming with a heart of a servant to the work. And so one of the things that we really stress in our work and in our teaching is how to bring your authentic self to this work, and how not to necessarily do something because it's prescriptive, but rather really leaning into your intuition, leaning into what feels right for any one given person, because everyone that you will work with as a healer or coach will have very unique circumstances. Yes, there are ways that you can find patterns. Yes, there are things that are similar amongst things like trauma, traumatic brain injury, anxiety, ADHD, all these different aspects or creative aspects of doing work with someone. But every person has their own unique story, and it's really important to be very present for each person that we work with. And so, one of the things that we dive deep into is when we start the course, we get into I call it the her story. It's the history of healers in general, whether it's shamanic, medicine women, medicine man, herbologists, whatever, different callings. We talk about the history of how medicine people and healers came about throughout what we see in the history, at least, right? There's probably lots we don't know about because it's covered in the earth. But from what we do know, we can cover that initial history. And then we dive deeper into what has come lately of mental health treatments, of personal body and mind and spirit healing, and how that's changing. We're seeing a shift from traditional Western medicine to something that's more holistic. And that's been around forever, but it's really getting mainstream attention now, which I really appreciate. If you think about the shows like How to Change Your Mind or Dosed, there's a whole prevalence of people talking about plant medicine and how that's helping change their perspective and how it's helping people to heal in a way that medicine from the Western world doesn't do alone. And then there are other aspects such as nutrition and lifestyle. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the latest things that people are hearing about: cold plunge and sauna, things like that, breath work, things that don't involve any sort of compound. It's just essentially, what can you do just with your physiology to help you feel better? We're going to dive also into plants, herbal medicine, like true herbal medicine that doesn't have psychoactive effects, but we have an incredible teacher who works with teas and other ways. She works with herbs that is magical. It is so incredible. And so it's really special to see all the different aspects of the ways you can work with clients, the ways that you can bring people to their own healing. Really, as a healer, our job isn't healing, right? It's helping people to heal themselves. It's holding the container that allows people to heal themselves. And so, we're going to really bring that forward as we teach the different modules. Another really important aspect of what we're going to be doing is teaching coaching and integration support, because a lot of people are taking matters into their own hands in how they're treating their mental health, which is, I think, fantastic. I think everyone has sovereignty over their minds and their bodies. And also, I feel like it's really important to know how to support someone through their journey. And how do you hold space? And how do you help people integrate the things that they're doing, whether it's psychedelics or whether it's something like breath work? There is a special way to hold space for people that really helps them feel supported and helps them to continue to guide themselves, right? It's not a matter of us doing something for our clients. Another really interesting module that I'm very excited, and I hope I can do a live with the instructor, is that we're going to be teaching expressive art and embodiment as a form of integration. And what we've found is something as meditative as engaging in art or movement can be a beautiful way for them to integrate their experiences. Oh, and I see Ryan's here. 1 second. Let me let him in. And here he is. This is very exciting.
Hello, here I am.
Hey. I
Like
had to start
magic.
the live a little early, so I was just giving people a little background on the course and what we're doing. But I'm super excited you're here.
Yes, me too. I was pumped to see this on my calendar today and to talk about the Healer's Ways because it's really an amazing program, and I'm excited to share more details about what people can expect and why they're doing this, right? Why we're doing this right now in history, where there's so many amazing things happening with plant medicine, but also many other things that are in the course as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm very excited to talk about what you're going to be teaching specifically because I feel like we're going to be having people join. So I have you pinned, Ryan.
Cool.
So as people join, you can just kind of let that go by
Perfect.
the wayside. Um, but what I really want to talk about, and I don't get to talk to you about this often, but when we do, it makes me really excited, is can you talk a little bit about your journey here, how you got into working with cannabis, and what is meaningful to you about the work you're doing now?
Yeah, great question. So, I could talk for 3 hours on this, but I'll make it short. But, I didn't choose cannabis. Cannabis has chosen me over and over and over again. I was
Mhm.
a product of, dare. I thought cannabis was going to rot my brain. I thought all psychedelics were the devil, right? And so I just said no for a while.
Mhm.
And when I got diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, what had happened was you know, I trusted the guy or the girl in the white lab coat because I had learned my whole life. They knew more about my health than I did. So when I got prescribed the first pharmaceutical at 16 after a 5-minute meeting, right, by the way, I tried it with all these expectations, all this hope, right? That the doctor had told me this is totally going to work. It's going to make you feel amazing. Well, actually, and I wouldn't have had these words those days, but it made me feel less connected to myself, made me feel more dissociated. And so this kept going. I went through about 7 or 8 different medications. And I started to ask myself, is this the way my life is going to be forever? And so around that time, I had a friend that was connecting with cannabis, and he mentioned, hey, I do something, I utilize cannabis for a similar sensation. Again, as a 16-year-old, I'm not sure how this conversation went, but, he's like, why don't you try it? And I was like, oh, I don't know. But I was like, what do I have to lose? So first couple of times, I might have Bill Clintoned it. I didn't inhale, didn't really feel anything. But the third time, as they say, was the charm. And in that experience, I realized that wasn't my thoughts. Like I just knew it. It was a clear, cognizant knowing. I didn't know what the heck to do with that information. I wasn't spiritual at that point of any sort, wasn't brought up in a religious household. So that really got me curious. And so then I fell more and more into the cannabis culture and utilizing cannabis all the time because the mistake I had made was that cannabis can do this thing for me. It's not unlocking something in me. It's, oh, I need this thing. Because again, for many of us, we grow up in a population and a society where if you have a headache, it's an Advil deficiency. If you have a pain, you have a pain med deficiency, right?
Mhm.
So I was used to taking something to get rid of something. And so that's how I utilized cannabis for the first few years that I was getting into it. And then I ended up going to cannabis school alongside psychology because I was fascinated with the mind. And when I was 23, my father, who had got into all this cannabis stuff with me, he wasn't a cannabis user, but just always supported me in my dreams and aspirations. He was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And when I was going to the cannabis school, there were the founders of the school ran a nonprofit on the side where they would help cancer patients interact with RSO, which stands for Rick Simpson oil. And its more professional name these days is FICO, full extract cannabis oil. So I was getting a witness with my own 2 eyes, these clients coming in, these patients coming in, tumors, I could see their scans, and they come back 3 to 6 months later, completely no tumors. And here in Boston, we have what's called the best cancer center in the country, if you want to go Western Med anyway. And they were perplexed. I mean, this is back in 2011, 2012. So I
Mhm.
had already known the benefits of cannabis and cancer. So when my dad got diagnosed, I decided, hey, why don't we take the cannabis that we're growing together, because my father and I had started growing together, and why don't we turn it into RSO and start administering it to him? And he was very reluctant. This is a guy that had only smoked a joint once in the 80s and ended up underneath a dining room table, paranoid the cops were coming to get him. So now here he is interacting with the strongest form of cannabis on planet Earth. So I made sure to sit with him, made sure to, be there to answer his questions. And that's really what I thought I was going to be doing, Shelly. It's just like helping him to the bathroom, watching movies with him, things like that.
Yeah.
What actually happened was I saw a totally different side of my father come forth, a much more vulnerable one, a much more one that was connected to what I would now call his soul or his higher self. And over the next 10 months, we got to create a lot of memories, but also a lot of closure. When he was diagnosed July 9th, and he was given until Halloween at best. He ended up surviving until the following June because he was still smoking cigarettes and doing all the things that gave him cancer in the first place. But at the end of the day, I don't believe I would have had that time with my father if it weren't for cannabis. So that really lit a fire under me because what I had just experienced with cannabis was different than anything I had learned at school or anything. I had learned the pharmacology, the history, the science, the cultivation, but I had never learned anything about really what I now teach is the main thing, which is the spirituality aspect of cannabis. And so I ended up getting into the industry, worked there for 5 years with over 5,000 medical patients. And that's where I started combining self-development and holistic health practices with cannabis. And then in 2019, a great challenge, aka opportunity in disguise, came forth where a corporation bought out the family-run dispensary I was working at. And so I had my exit from there. Started highly optimized, and since then I've been teaching the world how to unlock the psychedelic potential of cannabis for transformation, for healing, for connection, and really to access our highest self. So that's really how I got there. And my favorite part about the work I do is seeing the light come back on in people's eyes when they realize that it's not cannabis doing this for them. It's not any other psychedelic doing it for them. It's tapping into something that has always been innate and inside of us that is limitless in nature. It's infinite in nature. And seeing that light turn on in people's eyes where they realize they are infinite, they are a divine being, they are a divine fragment of God and creator is the best feeling in the world. It's my ultimate addiction, seeing that light. And that's my favorite part of doing what I do is getting to witness that with my own two eyes.
That's such an incredible and powerful story, Ryan. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Of course.
And and so, what I'm very excited about is the fact that you're going to be able to bring this to the healer's ways, and that you're going to be able to teach. One of the things that I tread carefully about when I talk about psychedelics, and that's such a hot topic right now.
Mm-hmm.
But not everyone can go to the jungle. Not everyone can go or wants to go down to over, up, down, wherever to another country in order to experience psychedelic healing. And what was a journey for me when I first started working with you was how cannabis can be a psychedelic medicine. And so I would love to hear your journey there and tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions to be asked. So I'll say first that for probably most people on this call, slash most people that are going to be witnessing these lives and whatever, you may really believe cannabis is not a psychedelic. And I'll kind of track it back this way. In the 30s, cannabis was made illegal for no other reason than just vested interest in other industries. There were three guys that got together that had a lot of money in cotton, nylon, textiles, things like that. And they realized that hemp was going to put them out of business. So they created a smear campaign called Reefer Madness, and that then led into the war on drugs, and basically led into the programming that our society has around cannabis. Cheech and Chong, Pineapple Express. So it's either you're watching cops and getting people busted, seeing people get busted for it and put in jail and their lives ruined. It's actually pretty hilarious how cops are like, that'll ruin your life. So let me put you in jail so I actually ruin your life. Quite a paradox, right? So because we've all been programmed to think cannabis is nothing other than something dumb that stoners do and lazy people do, again, abracadabra, right? Like when we are programmed with that, well, what we believe is what we create. And so that's why we see a lot of this culture of cannabis of people burning out with it and just using it to numb out. It's not a fault of the plant. It's a fault of a lack of education and awareness around how this plant was always meant to be utilized. Because when we talk about psychedelics in general, these were not typically the starting point for ancestral, traditions. They were like one of the last steps. You had to really show that you were ready to handle that. Now anyone can just go to a dispensary and smoke a joint and be like, cannabis made me paranoid because they don't even know how to take ownership over their life. And so if you're willing to show up as an adult and work with this plant, the plant will show you a lot more than if you're showing up as an infant. And so one of the things that a lot of people don't know about cannabis is that it produces melatonin in our brains. One of the main reasons that people love it for relaxation, sleep, things like that. But one of the things people also don't know is that melatonin acts as a precursor to our endogenous DMT production. So DMT, for anyone who doesn't know, is the most powerful hallucinogen on the planet, and we create it endogenously. We also have an endocannabinoid system. We create our own endocannabinoids, our own cannabinoid system, anandamide, 2-AG, things like that. So what happens is if you understand what to do with cannabis, aka something like breath work, for example, and you understand the mechanics behind the fact that you're producing more precursor, and then you know how to commit to breath work and start producing DMT, what can start happening is you have an extremely psychedelic experience. But the difference, Shelly, is that you can grow this plant in your backyard. You can start and finish in under 90 minutes. It's very practical. It's very safe compared to other medicines like MDMA and things like that. And I'm not here to create a hierarchy around psychedelics, but again, let's talk about harm reduction, right? Cannabis is the safest thing in the entire planet when it comes to a psychedelic. And there's good reason for that. You can titrate what dose size you want. You can figure out if you even want THC included. There are hemp varieties, there are other varieties. You can really make it your own. And that's why I call it the people's plant, because if you want to learn how to utilize ayahuasca, for instance, that's going to be a long journey of understanding how to utilize that. If you mix the brew wrong, you can die. You know, mushrooms, you can get mold poisoning with different types of mushrooms and things like that. So there's some other things that are a little bit more challenging with other psychedelics. And so with cannabis, you kind of avoid all of that, right? As long as you're growing your own. Because one of the main things that we can discuss if you want to go in deeper is how not all cannabis is created equal. The way that cannabis is meant to be utilized as a psychedelic is that the person who cultivates the plant, their energy directly ties into the final product. So if they're traumatized, if they're in patterns of anxiety and paranoia, you better believe that goes into the plant, because how we do anything is how we do everything. So if we understand that a child grown up in a violent household has a higher tendency to be violent, then why wouldn't we also extrapolate that into plants? How we do anything is how we do everything, once again. And so these are the forgotten keys that a lot of people aren't aware of. Most cannabis in this country is grown in a factory farm type style. So most people are not even spiritually aware. They're not even aware of drinking spring water, eating organic food. And now we're asking them to understand how to work with energy of a plant that was grown in a commodity type fashion. And it's a very challenging thing to do. So it's a multifaceted issue, but at the same time, this whole idea of cannabis being a psychedelic is not new. When you look at authors like Chris Bennett, this is all cannabis has ever been, except for the last maybe 100 years or so. And before 1930, it was also a part of over 85% of all medications on the market. So it's a very interesting thing when you start talking about this, because a lot of people think, oh, this is something very new. And I'm like, no, this is actually a remembering of how things always were. You know, cannabis was on the Silk Road. It was in Zoroastrianism. It was in everything. It was in ancient Judaism. And they were using it as a sacrament to get closer to God. It's mentioned in the Bible, right? Under cannabosum. And so, again, there's really never been a time that cannabis was not a psychedelic, except for the last 100 years where we've been programmed that it's a bad thing, it's somehow terrible to use, and it's going to rot your brain. Meanwhile, the government has no problem giving us experimental, let's say, things, but saying that cannabis, this natural plant that God put on green earth, has got to be bad on some imaginary lines, but not others. So that's a lot of how cannabis can actually become a psychedelic and how it always has been. But again, someone has to believe that in order to experience it, because we are the creator of our reality. So as we've been doing, say, Breathe with Cannabis or the Coach with Cannabis program or any of these programs we do, we've been seeing more and more people tap into it. Why? Because they're seeing other people go, yeah, it is that. And they're like, okay, I'll believe it too. Boom, now they have the psychedelic experience. So it's really powerful and it's very simple. All you get to do is create an intention, connect with the plant, and do some breath work. And you will see for yourself, direct experience wise, that cannabis is a psychedelic. Because I always say life is not an observation sport. Regardless of who believes me here, I don't want you guys to believe me. I want you to go test it out for yourself, because that's how you really experience it.
Yeah, and I think I love that you teach such an incredible grow course,
Mhm.
because one of the other things that I found fascinating in learning more about cannabis was that it actually cleans the soil. And so if you have, if you're getting flour in a place that was contaminated, you have no idea what you're actually using. That
Mhm.
you could actually potentially be absorbing mercury or any sort of bad compound from the earth. So that's why I love the fact that you teach people how to grow your own cannabis.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, cannabis is a bioremediator. So
Mhm.
something that some people on this call or these lives may not notice or may not be aware of is that they're actually utilizing hemp and cannabis to clean up Chernobyl right now. And then when you think about the conventional farming practices utilized, at least in America, for the last, say, 100 years, and you talk about all that glyphosate, all the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, and then you think about a lot of these farms are now becoming cannabis farms, and people are wondering why people are getting something like cannabis hypermesis syndrome,
Mhm.
or they're seeing, oh my goodness, now cannabis is going to be bad in this way. It's like, is cannabis the reason? Or is it human error when it comes to trying to control the earth rather than flow with it? Because at the end of the day, I'm a strict organic gardener. I don't mess with any bottled nutrients. I never have and I never will. And at the end of the day, it's funny on the grow side here because some people will say, well, Ryan, I would grow organic, but I want to get bigger yields. And there's this like silly belief that growing organically is somehow not going to be as big of a yield as non-organic. Guys, organic will give the best yields ever. When you look at Northern California and you look at those people growing up in the hills and they have these plants that literally have to get in a ladder to touch, they're not giving those plants nutrients. Those are completely grown in the living soil, just as God intended it. And that's really it's that simple. But humans want to overcomplicate things because it can't be that simple. We got to overcomplicate it. And I'm all for humans playing, like matchmaker, if you will, when it comes to messing around with compounds and whatnot. But thinking that we're improving it is just a fool's errand. All we're doing is going on a silly quest to split things apart and try to make it unnatural. And that's why I always say to people, if you want to connect with cannabis, the only way to do it, in my opinion, is do it as nature intended. Don't be interacting with pure THC because when you interact with pure THC, you're not interacting with the spirit of the plant. And if you're not just looking to get messed up and you're actually looking for connection, you need the real plant for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing that I am excited to hear you teach more about is how cannabis can be an integration tool. And
Yeah.
so, like in our coaching course, um, I love that we're teaching people all different aspects of how to connect. It's not just like Friday night after a hard day's work, it's not just psychedelic experiences, it's all the things. So, can you talk a little bit about how, as a coach, you might use cannabis to interact with your clients?
Oh, I think it's the secret superpower. And I think that if we could fast forward 5 years, I think it's going to be a much more commonplace type thing. I mean, even in the 5 years I've been doing this, when I first came out and started talking about cannabis as a psychedelic, no one wanted to hear anything about it. The psychedelic community was laughing at me because they're like, oh, cannabis? I did that in high school. The cannabis community was laughing at me because all they're looking to do is numb out. They don't want to actually look at what they're doing and their habits and whatnot.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of in this no man's land. And in the last 5 years, now a lot of people are talking about it. Okay. Many people do breath work and cannabis ceremonies. When Chris and I started doing those, no one was doing them.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, it's great that it's spreading. And the reason it works so well is because integration is where you take states and you turn it into traits. All right. That's the whole process if you really want to think about it in that way. And so let's think about the common person in the world, or hell, even the spiritual person these days. We have years of programming. We have jobs and taxes and all these things weighing on us. We're not able to be free in the world like our ancestors were. We have to jump through a lot more hoops. And so the amount of time that I have to go do a deep mushroom experience or ayahuasca or whatever is very slim to none these days because I got to be on the ball. But if I can connect with something that brings my consciousness right out to here, because
Mhm.
again, you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. If you can bring your consciousness out to just here, capture what you were looking for, and then integrate it right away, well, now you found something that's really practical. Now you don't have to leave your family. Now you don't have to go to the jungle. Now you don't need $10,000 to go sit in some ceremony at some center. And I'm not saying that's bad, but let's be real. How many people have an extra 10 G's and a bunch of time laying around? It's just not what's common these days. And so, what we need, if we want psychedelics to reach a mainstream amount of people, we need something that's not a big jump. And we need something that's going to already be down the street from them, able to grow in their backyard, already a part of their life. Already, a lot of the programming is starting to leave because people are starting to see cannabis as medicine, et cetera. And so, really, the beauty of this is that as human beings, we're going to be running into blind spots, shadow coming up, things of that nature. And like I said before, most of us don't have extra time even to eat 5 grams of mushrooms and go really deep. Because after that, you went so far out that it's going to take you an equal amount of time at least to come back and make sense of all that. And I don't know if anyone here has kids. I don't. But what I know about kids is that you don't get breaks. You can't tell your kids, hey, just leave mom or dad alone for the next couple of days. All right. Fend for yourself. Yeah. Good luck. You can't tell your job, hey, you know what? I had a plant medicine ceremony and I really just want to take some time to integrate. They're going to be like, cool, you're fired. And so you need to work within the system until you can break out of it. Okay. And so cannabis is great because at night, let's say I have a business issue I'm running into, or a relationship challenge I'm running into, or really insert any challenge here. Cannabis is very good at any challenge I've ever gone through, but I can connect with the plant, go sit in a meditation for 30 minutes, get my answer, and say if it was an argument I have with Rachel, I can go right in there. I can look her right in the eye and say, I apologize for my hand on this, and then we're all good to go. And if it's a business challenge, I can voice note you or, Chris or whoever else was involved in it and be like, hey, I got an answer for that. What do you think of this?
Yeah.
And then we can go back and forth. And then I'm right back in my day-to-day life because I think one thing that it's taken me some years to be able to own this statement is that, if we've been there forever, right? If we're infinite beings and this is a dream illusion we live in, then really this is the experience I want to be in. This is the experience that's quasi finite. This meat suit I'm in, this avatar. I want to be here every second I can. And so it's funny how these days I don't really care to take big psychedelic journeys anymore because the second I'm there, I miss being here. There was a long time where I didn't like here and I wanted to go there. And I think that's where a lot of people are at when they're always healing, right? They forget the point of having a race car is not to work on it all the time. It's actually to put it on the track and race what you actually love to do. The point of the human experience is to be messy, is to color outside the lines. And so if you can have a tool that helps you just auto-correct yourself, right? Start to see a little bit of your blind spots. And it teaches you how to start seeing these blind spots even without it. That to me is a tool that is irreplaceable in my life. And that is exactly what cannabis is as an integration tool. If you do a deeper ceremony and you come out and maybe you're like, oh, what was that thing? Or maybe you feel like you're not fully in a closed loop yet, you can connect with a couple of hits, tap a little bit back into that space, not nearly as deep unless you really go there with an edible, but you can tap a little bit into there, remind yourself of what you were forgetting, and then find a way to integrate it when you come back in terms of a meditation practice or breathwork practice or anything like that. So to me, it's the ultimate integration tool because of this one reason. You can't solve a problem from the same level of thinking that created it. You also can't solve a problem from 20,000 levels above it, okay? And so you want something that's very mediated. And cannabis is really that perfect balance where you're not in the same level that created it, but you're also not so far ahead that you don't know how to talk, you don't know how to like be a human being. So it's a perfect, perfect practical tool for any human in the human experience today.
Yeah. And which leads me to, I know there are countries that still um, really frown upon cannabis use, but we're very lucky here in the US. And I know there
Mm.
are other countries that have embraced cannabis as well. Can you talk about the accessibility, like why
Mm.
this is important in this work to have something that pretty much everyone can get access to easily?
Yeah. So, again, like when we look at like us on the screen right here and whoever's tuning into the live, for us, we may know decentralized ways to get mushrooms or MDMA or LSD or things like that. We probably, if you're here, you probably have known for a long time that the world that's given to us or the world they say it is not the world it actually is. So
Mhm.
for us, it's very easy to think, oh, well, Gwyneth Paltrow has a show on mushrooms now. So everyone must be totally aware that mushrooms weren't what Dare said it was, what the war on drugs said they were. But again, like what I want people to realize is we live in a bubble here. Okay. If you go into like a Stop and Shop, which up here in Boston is like a big supermarket, I don't know if they exist other places, but if you go in there and you just feel the energy, not many people know about this stuff.
Mhm.
And so, if we're looking at accessibility and we're also thinking about programming, we need something that's going to perfectly balance that once again. We need something that's going to be like, okay enough with the mainstream that they're not like, oh my God, you're doing what? but we also need something that's available because most people don't have these decentralized networks. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't feel comfortable ever trying to tell a client who's new to a psychedelic, hey, hop on Telegram and just send someone $100 worth of Solana and hopefully you don't get raided. It's like, yeah, that's scary. That's not putting my client in a safe position. It's not putting me in a safe position. So if we're going to be working with psychedelics with clients, which is already a huge risk for these other psychedelics, because one thing that a lot of people don't know, I come from the world of having to watch over my shoulders and everything with cannabis. A lot of these business coaches that are now like, I host MDMA ceremonies. You're going to get raided, my man or woman. You're going to get raided. And so I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but safety is the ultimate priority, not only for our clients, but also for ourselves. And so cannabis is very okay, let's say, or okayed in many parts of the world now. Thailand has legalization, Germany has legalization, Mexico, Canada, the US is kind of in between. But the great thing about the US is, even though cannabis is not federally legal, in a backdoor way, cannabis did become federally legal. And this is one of the big reasons why I tell everyone on the Coach with Cannabis program, cannabis is so much safer than trying to bring your clients through mushrooms or things like that, because you got to be the one that tries to get them those things. And then now you're a drug dealer, right? And it doesn't matter what you were doing. I was helping my client with medicine. Yeah, you're still a drug dealer in the eyes of the law. So they don't care about any of the work you're doing. They don't care at all. They'll be happy to put you in prison and make you a private prison, right? So at the end of the day, cannabis, or rather hemp rather, in 2018, the Farm Bill passed, and that legalized a lot of different hemp products. But because the DEA and the governing bodies don't understand anything about cannabis, they made an oopsie. And what they did was they designated THCA as a hemp cannabinoid, pretty much unregulated. Delta 9 THC, which we all know gets you high, is a cannabis cannabinoid. Now, hemp and cannabis, they're the same plant. The only distinguishing factor is hemp is any cannabis with 0.3% of delta 9 THC or under. But here's the funny thing. THCA does not turn into delta 9 THC until it has a flame put to it or a lot of oxygen. And so basically what's happening is that if I take a nug from my cannabis plant and I have it tested, it's not going to really have any delta 9 THC in there, maybe a little bit from oxygen or anything, but like 0.1, 0.2%. It might have 28 or 30% THCA. And under the Farm Bill, that's now constituted as hemp. So basically now what we have in the US is we have a bunch of THCA hemp suppliers that are really just selling cannabis, but it's legal and you can have it shipped right to your door. Okay. So not only do you not have to even go to a store, you literally can get it shipped to your door, even if you're in West Virginia or South or North Dakota, any of these kind of like, or Texas, right? Any of these states that are just like holding on and white knuckling for dear life at the old way. And at the end of the day, it's silly, right? Like we all here have to live in a world where people actually think that because of some imaginary line, a plant is either good or bad. Okay. It's like we're living in idiocracy, but it's turned from a comedy into a documentary. So that's one of the best things about the accessibility of cannabis is that in the US, it's open season, Canada, open season, Mexico, open season, Germany, Thailand, Portugal, and there's other places too. Spain has they don't have full legalization, they have decriminalization, and it's going to keep happening. It's just going to explode because you know what we can count on for the powers that shouldn't be? They like money and they don't like to miss out on money. So finally, we have that on our side. The cannabis industry is a $100 billion plus industry already, and we haven't even hit real federal legalization here in the States. So the money's on our side. It's only a matter of time until accessibility gets bigger and bigger. And when that happens, people are going to need education. They're going to need to understand even basic things like, hey, Ryan, what's THC versus CBD? I tell our students all the time in the program, yes, it's great to have people reach their higher self and have full-on transformative experiences. But rest assured, you're going to have a lot of clients that are like, wait, what's THC? What does this strain name mean? What are terpenes? Because again, we've been so programmed to think this thing is bad when in reality, it's completely the opposite, that a lot of people know nothing about it. And so even the basics are going to be earth-shattering new news to most people. So the accessibility is a big part of it because if we don't have that, then there's no safety. And if we have no safety, then what are we doing in a coach-client relationship? putting someone else in danger, putting ourselves in danger, that is just irresponsible. And I think I speak for everyone here when I say there are a lot of people out there doing stuff like that. I personally don't support it. It's not my flavor of ice cream. They can do what they want, but I'm not going to be a part of that. So for me, I want to make sure that ultimate thing is that my clients and I am also safe.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And I appreciated you saying all that because that is a very real part of like all of these programs that are lining up to teach people about psychedelics. This is a glossed over part of that work. And so, as someone that wants to teach people in, various modalities, yes, there's a harm reduction component of what we're teaching. So people are educated about psychedelics, what they do, the classics, but for especially if you're not willing to go outside the country and you're just kind of diving into this is such an important aspect of the work that can really deepen your practice, deepen your own work with yourself, because we have to walk the talk, right?
Mm, mm.
And also when you're working with a client, enable them, like as an example, doing IFS work, enabling someone to be able to connect with cannabis, just kind of soften
Mm.
parts and help them really start to see, what's going on with them is such a powerful tool. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I don't know, we haven't talked about this, but people my age and older only remember dare. They only remember like this is a drug, this is your brain on drugs. And so I feel like there's this whole aspect of teaching people that are 55 and older that cannabis is a tool that's really helpful, especially as you age, with inflammation, with pain management. When if you have someone in your family going through cancer, whether they're doing a traditional treatment or not, this can be all aspects of helping people to live rich, full lives in their later years. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, 100%. And the kind of foundation or first principle of this is that our endocannabinoid system, aka the largest regulatory system in our body, the only one that has two-way communication between mind and body, and the one that mimics the cannabinoids, the phytocannabinoids found in the cannabis plant because they're so powerful and useful for our body, that system designates and controls so much of our well-being or lack thereof that as a lot of people get older and they didn't know about all the stuff we're talking about glyphosate and all these things, and so their body's starting to really get into tough shape. They're starting to fall into the belief systems of, oh, as you get older, you just break down, things get harder, your body doesn't work as good. What they need is a two-part thing. They need something that's going to help them with pain management or, glaucoma, IBS, whatever it is, but they also need something that's going to help them get red pilled a little bit and start seeing through the facade of what this world really is. And so at the end of the day, it's so important for older people to have access to cannabis and to have the education alongside it because
Right.
those are the people that need it the most. Like you're saying, I mean, when I worked at the dispensary, the largest demographic was 55 plus. And these people either had never connected with cannabis or it had been like 20, 30 years. And so now they're coming in and they have access to cannabis much stronger in certain ways anyway. And they don't really know what to do with it. And at the end of the day, if we're not there to help guide them, then yeah, they're just going to replace, Percocet or alcohol for cannabis, right? Which, yeah, okay, quasi healthier, but that's like getting 1/100th out of what cannabis can actually bring to the table. Because at the end of the day, it's a transformative medicine. And if we don't educate people on that, then they're just not getting the most bang for their buck. And at the same time, these older people have been a part of so many different phases of how the plan has been looked at, how the world has been, the lies that have been giving, et cetera. And a lot of times that trauma that's inside of them is what's leading to the dis-ease on the outside. Because again, as within, so without. So imagine if you can teach them to connect with the plant, right? That's going to allow them to start remediating some of that trauma while they're having fun. They're doing breath work, they're hanging out with friends. The other big thing too, that isn't something I talk about often, but it's something I saw with my own two eyes when I worked at the dispensary is a lot of these people, they're reaching retirement age. They've been working at the same job for say 30 years. They retire, they're excited, and now they have no life. They have no friends. They maybe don't have a partner anymore. Maybe they passed away. Maybe they're still there, but they don't really have any community. So now they start coming to a dispensary and we became their family a lot of the time. They would come in and like, I don't really do anything except watch Price is Right or whatever, but I come in here and everyone knows my name. It's like cheers, I get to talk to people. And so for them, it's a really great opportunity to gain a new community. Because now when I would watch these people come in, they'd meet other people and they're, hey, you look as old as I am, ha ha ha. And they start connecting and they start hanging out and they start going for walks and smoking a joint and talking about life, talking about their kids, talking about their dreams, who they want to be when they grow up. It starts getting them back into the mind of a child. And again, I'm not a religious person, but I do know a good line when I hear it. And the Bible states, if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must first enter the mind of a child. And so at the end of the day, if we can start to get these people as they're getting older in their physical body to start accessing their youthful energy from within, not only is it going to make them happier, but that happiness doesn't just stop at an emotional level. It ripples into the physical, the mental, and the spiritual level too. And all of a sudden, they start having a lot of really amazing things happen in their life. And so it's so important that these people, the people 50, 55 plus, are getting this education. Because if they're not, even if they're finding out about cannabis, they're getting, again, 1/100th of what this medicine really has the opportunity to do. They can also start cultivating the plant, get themselves a new hobby. I saw a lot of people at New England Grassroots Institute, the school I went to. I mean, most of the people there were 55 plus. They were retiring. They wanted to start growing. It was now legal in Massachusetts to grow. And so it was so fun, and that's the biggest part of cannabis culture, real cannabis culture, that I don't think is talked about is the connection deepening benefit. The ability to smoke a joint with someone and say, hey, no matter what the color of your skin is, what gender you are, what age you are, you know what? We're a lot more similar than we are different. And that is medicine that the humanity needs now more than ever because there's so many thirst traps out there trying to tell us that we're different, hate this person, they're different than you. It's like, no, we're all the exact same. The only people different than us are the ones trying to put us against ourselves. And so at the end of the day, the ability of a lot of these people to remind themselves of that and have the direct experience is invaluable.
Yeah, the people's plant. You gotta love
Yes.
that, right? So my
True.
next question is going to be about relationships. Can you talk
Mm,
about cannabis and how it helps people stay connected in a heart space?
yes. So one of the earliest memories I have of me being a cannabis user is probably when I was about 18 or 19. I was dating a woman and we were getting into, normal arguments, whatever. And I remember that anytime that, deep down, anytime that I was being a dick, okay, I'll just call it what it is. Anytime I was being a dick, and part of me knew it, my ego didn't want me to see it, right? It was like, no, you're totally in the right. Don't apologize. If I thought about connecting with cannabis, my ego would scream at me, no, don't do that, because then you're going to apologize. And that, in hindsight, is all you need to hear to understand why cannabis is good at relationships. Because you know what it does? Once again, like I just said, it helps remind us we're more similar than we are different, that we want to connect. If anyone here has seen that, it's a pretty famous now statue that was at Burning Man about 3, 4 years ago and it was two adults, right? It was like the exoskeleton of an adult, right? Done with wire, right? But it was two adult bodies with their backs facing away from each other. They're sitting there all angry at each other. But inside the sculpture are two little kids trying to connect. And that is what cannabis does. Cannabis reminds us that at the end of the day, we're not here to be right because right and wrong don't exist. So if you want to be right, you're wrong, paradoxically. Okay. That's a tongue twister. I'll have you guys think about that one. But at the same time, what we're here to do, if we're all one being experiencing itself, then really, who am I and who are you? We are mirrors for each other. But if we let our egos run the game, then we're just annoyances to each other. We're just people getting in one another's way. We're just people that, oh, that person can do this for me, whatever. But at the end of the day, that's not really what we're meant to be doing here. We're meant to be mirroring back our reality to one another so that we can start to see where we're stuck in shadow, limiting beliefs, etc. So let's say that Rachel says, hey, Ryan, can you stop leaving your lemons all over the counter when you squeeze them into your drink in the morning? All right. I feel attacked. This is definitely a real story. Okay. So, I squeeze lemons in the morning into my water and whatever. And sometimes I leave them there. I forget. So if she says, hey, Ryan, can you pick up those lemons? My ego might want to be like, stop reprimanding me. It's annoying. Right. But if I connect with cannabis after I do that, I'll come on and be like, yeah, you're right. Sorry. Like, actually, what's coming up for me that I've been really just like upregulated And it's allowed me, like, thank you for saying that to me, because it allowed me to see, like, hey, I got to slow myself down. If I don't even see the lemon that I have there, and I'm not like even aware that I'm leaving stuff out, what's that saying about my internal state of being? So you see, right? At first, it was just an annoyance. This person just trying to annoy me, and ugh, why don't they just deal with it? I deal with stuff for them, any of that stuff. It turns from that into, you know what? That actually was an interesting inner quest I just went on, because I've been realizing my nervous system is actually really upregulated, and those are signs of it, right? And also my ability to bark back right away is also part of that. Like, why didn't I want to connect right away? What's going on there? And so cannabis has been the number one relationship tool I have ever found in my life. Like, there are other things that will work for creativity, for instance, or whatever. Relationship healing, cannabis is my number one and pretty much my only medicine that I connect with for that reason. Psilocybin or whatever can bring you into great harmony, but nothing can just pattern interrupt you like cannabis can. Because again, you take 5 grams of mushrooms, yeah, will it work? Sure, but try actually having a logical conversation with your partner while you're like tripping balls, right? It doesn't really work that way. But cannabis, you can take a couple hits, realize, oh wow, that's my ego. That's not the real me that wants to actually connect with my partner and wants to figure out, yeah, why is that happening? Why am I doing that? As soon as I get into that space, I can walk right up to her and have a full-on conversation with her and integrate that and be like, okay, there's one more way I can be aware of the ego that I wasn't before. I can be aware of the thing trying to separate me, trying to make me feel like I'm a victim that I wasn't aware of before, so that I can step more into my ability to be a creator. Because at the end of the day, victimhood is a fast road to nowhere. No one's going to come save you, and at the end of the day, you're not a victim. So I don't want any of what's in here to be telling me that. So if I can connect with something that's immediately going to connect me with my higher self, my soul, that's going to tell me, hey man, you actually know you were in the wrong there, so just go out there and own up to it, and it's okay. And that's going to be something that I rely on heavily. And it's been fantastic for that. There's so many different exercises you can go through with it, but really it's just like just connecting with a partner and just talking. That alone has so much healing to it, even without the exercises or the breath work or anything else included.
Yeah, that reminds me, I have such a similar story because there was one time, and it wasn't that long ago, but it was maybe like a year ago. And Mark and I had kind of lost our way a little bit. We were really stressed about moving or something. And time had gone by where we were just both being kind of grumpy with each other. And we had set up a time we were going to connect with some plant medicine. And I remember being like, oh, he's going to apologize. He's going to be so sorry when we drop in together and all this stuff. And we were so busy, we had no time. And it was just this one time I was so excited about. And I remember it's like we were connecting, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm sorry. It just like showed me all my own stuff, and I was just like, that's why this medicine is so powerful. It's just like really being able to see it in ourselves. And I think that's the most important aspect of what we're doing here, is just helping people to find their true selves and to really connect together and to love each other.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
one thing I'll say on that too, Shelly, is I just had this pop through as a idea, which you guys can take as the official term you get, when you're getting ideas, okay, from cannabis. But, I got this as a idea that I'll make it personal to me, but I would imagine if I was a betting man, I could bet on this, that most of us are not aware of how much armor is around our heart, how much we have closed off our heart. I wasn't aware, and I still find new levels almost every day of like, oh my God, why did I close that off, right? And so at the end of the day, it's kind of like with meditation. If I'm having a client that's going through a really tough time, and I know the meditation would help them, but I also know it's not a quick ROI in most cases. Am I going to tell them, hey, Shelly, go meditate for, I don't know, an hour a day for the next 60 days and you'll feel better? She's going to be like, Ryan, I get Amazon overnight shipping. I'm not used to that elongated of an amount of time. I need something now, which is why most people go to pharmaceuticals or whatever else it is.
Right.
If I'm explaining to people that they have armor or a wall around their heart, most people don't really know, because they're in the left brain, how to, like, what does that mean, dude? I don't make it practical, okay? But if I have them connect with cannabis, which allows them to go directly into their heart, and I go, now what's there? They're going to feel the sensation, the intensity, and it's going to capture their attention. And they're going to be like, whoa, okay, I now experienced what you're talking about. I may be a little confused on what the hell I just experienced, but I know there's something there now. There's something there that I can relate to the words you're saying. Now, if I tell that person, Shelly, now go meditate for the next 30 to 60 days, and that you just experienced, that's what you're going to bring in your reality more. They're going to be like, okay, I get the mission now because they got a glimpse. And I think we go on blind faith so often in the world. I mean, look at religion, right? It's like it went from something of like, hey, have the direct experience of God to no, you can't have the direct experience of God, but you got to come here and this guy really connects with God or this girl really connects with God, and also they need money. And so at the end of the day, you know, God is meant to be directly experienced and creator, whatever you want to call it, omniscient power, it doesn't really matter what the term is. And so at the end of the day, you know, once again, life is not an observation sport. We shouldn't have to go into something with blind faith. You know, creator would never ask us to do that. I don't really know where that myth came of just like we just got to believe. It's like, nah, dude, we can know through a direct experience. And so that's one of the other best parts of cannabis that kind of ties into the same part around the relationship aspect is the fact that like when you connect with the plant, you don't have to think about what a chakra system is. You can just feel it. And so again, like as people that are getting into spirituality in this realm and whatnot, that have been programmed to think the world is just linear and logical, cannabis can be one of the best ways to red pill people really quickly into like, yeah, meditation's real. Yeah, chakras are real. Yeah, heart space is real. Yeah, all this stuff is really real. But don't believe me. Go have the experience yourself. All right. That's why I always tell everyone, don't believe anything I say, because that's how we got into this pickle here. Okay. Is that most of us just read a textbook and we're like, that's how it is. And it's like, if you want to know what an apple is, how many textbooks do you need to read before you realize there's nothing that's going to teach you what an apple is more than just going and eating an apple? So that's really where I feel cannabis can be not only a great thing for relationship healing, but being able to allow people to have the direct experience of the ethereal, of the spiritual, to get them more aware of why they meditate, why they do breath work, why they want, what the shadow is, all these things that we hear about that are very airy fairy sometimes. They don't really have any practicality to them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, we had a couple questions. Do you mind if
Yeah.
I ask? Okay,
Oh,
so
please.
we
Fire
had
them
somebody ask, in the course, what are some of the things you're going to help teach a coach or a
Hmm.
facilitator
Hmm.
in working with cannabis?
Yeah, great question.
Mhm.
So, what we're going to be focusing on in the healer's ways, we're going to be focusing on the basics, right? How to dose, how to create a ceremonial space, how to look at different varieties and understand cannabinoids, terpenes, how to specifically ask your client what experience they're looking for and kind of grade their level of comfort. Like a process that's going to allow you to say, meet with Shelly and ask Shelly, Shelly, what's your prior experience? Okay. How are you feeling in your nervous system? 1 is really relaxed, 10 is super stressed. Where are you there? And then understanding how to take that information and supply a cannabis experience. Now, by supply a cannabis experience, I mean share with your client what cannabis varieties, or let's just say THCA hemp varieties, wink, wink, to purchase, where to purchase them from. I'll link you guys with some people that I very much trust that are cultivating organic medicine so that you can understand the basics. And then also from there, I'm going to give you guys kind of a little bit of a buffet when it comes to different modalities that I've mixed with cannabis, I've seen mixed with cannabis, just because you may be someone who does Tantra. And you're like, how do I mix Tantra with cannabis? That can happen, right? We have Zipporah, a past student who does that. Breath work, meditation, Tai Chi, which is the best pun for Tai Chi ever. Okay. You know, these kind of things is really nothing that can't be mixed with cannabis. So, a lot of what I'm going to be teaching in there too is how to open yourself up to the insane amount of things that you can take and make this cannabis practice your own. Because again, your unique magic is the most important thing to provide into it as its essence. Because otherwise, it's just a standardized thing and it's just not that fun. So that's a lot of the things I'll be teaching in there so that when you walk away, our goal is, you know, wow, I now know that cannabis is a psychedelic. I know how to work with it. I know how to keep myself and my clients safe. And I know an innumerable amount of different options I have when it comes to how to work with a client with cannabis. Maybe there's someone who's really paranoid that they're going to get too high. Great. You're going to know how to purchase hemp varieties that don't even have THC so that when they meditate, they can access a little more sensation in their body. And then over time, they can say, hey, Shelly, I think I'm actually ready to go a level up, right? Because that's what you want your client to be doing. You want them to feel confident to go, yeah, I'm ready to go to the next level. Great, I can facilitate that. So that's a lot of what we're going to be focusing on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so excited for
Me too.
that. Even though I know it all.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
thank you for
yeah.
I
So
mean,
excited.
I'm so excited. So,
Yeah.
okay. So last thing I want to kind of cover is, are you able to provide specific tools for coaches or facilitators in giving them ideas about how they're going to bring this medicine into their practice?
Yes. And that's something that what I love to do for this, because again, I can give you guys, I could make modules and all that kind of stuff on what you could do. The much better way and the way I'm planning to tackle it in the Healer's Ways is after you've learned everything from the module I'm going to teach and everything like that, I'm going to actually do a Q&A with you guys and actually understand your individual situation. So maybe you're someone who's a fitness coach or someone that's obsessed with fitness, and now you're curious on like, hey, Ryan, how do I mix fitness coaching with cannabis? Great, let's talk about that. Let's talk about pain relief for your clients with CBD. Let's talk about THC enhancing testosterone sometimes, not actually taking away from it, like the science will tell you. Let's talk about those kind of things so I can help you on an individual basis because this stuff, again, it's not new, but we'll use new as a term. It's so new to be remembered that at the same time, a lot of people are confused. They're like, I have no idea how I'd mix these two things. But what I can tell you guys is, if I can go out there and somehow not fit into the cannabis community, not fit into the psychedelic community, and still you guys are here wanting to know about cannabis as a psychedelic, trust me when I say it's going to be easier for you than having to do everything I did the last 5 years of convincing people and educating people on it. So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, that's something I'm more than happy to work with people on an individual basis. We'll do a Q&A call and just go around to each person and see how we can actually implement it in there because there's so many different things, right? You can do breath work, you can do meditation, you can do in person, you can do through the internet, you can do tantra, you can do just consulting, right? Like, hey, what's THC, CBD, teaching elderly people how to go to the dispensary and have a great experience there, teaching them what strain names mean. I mean, there's so many different areas, getting into cultivation and teaching people cultivation, getting into, I mean, literally anything, right? So at the end of the day, that's something we'll handle on an individual basis. That way everyone gets in the group for sure.
And that everything you just said is worth the price of admission, right?
Yeah.
Alone,
Yeah.
right? Like I was just like, I want to take this course.
Yeah.
So it's going to be so fantastic to have you. I am so honored, and it's just such a privilege that you're going to take time to do a module with this course and all the things that you just talked about, the breath work, the sound healing. Those are some of the other modalities we're going to be covering.
Yes.
So it makes this beautiful marriage
Mhm.
of modalities that people can kind of cherry pick and see what calls to them. Yeah.
Shelly, one more thing that I forgot to mention earlier, but probably is the biggest thing here. So I want you guys to pay attention to this, okay? Is that even with other psychedelics like psilocybin or ayahuasca, MDMA, ketamine, whatever it is, let me ask you guys, how many of those would you guys feel comfortable, even if you knew everything about psilocybin, ayahuasca, how many of those would you feel comfortable leading someone through a ceremony on Zoom with?
Mm,
Okay, I'll wait. The answer is zero, except for one, cannabis. And
right.
my favorite thing is when people say, you could never have a ceremony through Zoom. I'm like, oh, really? Why don't you ask the 3,500 people that have come to Breathe with Cannabis over the last 3 years what they think? Because I think they have a starkly different opinion. So
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 3 years online, the exact way that I'm telling you guys how to do it. So this isn't something that's just theoretical. This is something we've been doing actively. In Coach with Cannabis, we have many different people come in and do online ceremonies with cannabis. This is probably the biggest aspect of why you would want to be utilizing cannabis in a otherwise psychedelic coaching practice because you can work with anyone from anywhere. And it's so much safer that way. So that's one of the big things I forgot to mention that I just wanted to throw in at the end here.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And the students will get an experience that's part of it is that there is actually a psychedelic cannabis experience in that
Yes.
course, which I'm very excited about.
Yes. So excited.
Yay. So I'm just so thrilled you hopped on with us today, Ryan. And guess who we're talking to tomorrow?
Ooh, is it Rachel?
It's Rachel.
Yes. Yes. My lovely lady.
Yes. So we're excited to talk astrology tomorrow, and we actually will have a module that Rachel's going to teach. And so if any of you have felt the calling to learn more about astrology, tune in tomorrow. It's going to be really good.
Prepare to have your mind blown, guys. Like I've worked with a lot of astrologers throughout my day, and they've all been cool in their own way. Rachel's is very unique. She goes very deep, and she's not afraid to give you like the whoa, that's actually what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. Definitely tune in. That's going to be powerful.
Yep. Super excited. So, all right, guys. So
Yeah.
how you sign up is sagesoulacademy.com.
Yes.
Go there. And then we will be starting July 23rd. So I hope you join us. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Ryan, thank you so much again. You're just an amazing person. And I just love
Thank
working with
you.
you. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Amazing, recognize amazing, Shelly. I'm so excited to support you guys in the program. Hop in. If you're feeling that yes in your heart, hop in, okay? Life is not an observation sport. You got to go out there and live it, all right? So love you guys. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks. Have a good one.
Much love.
Bye.
Peace.